Hello and welcome to the Paper Garden YouTube channel. I've just started recording this as I think a helicopter is above, so hopefully you can't hear that too much. But I just wanted to record a video today and do a little bit of a paint with me video. And the idea behind it is I just want to spend some relaxing time painting and talking to you. And yeah, I just love it to be an opportunity for you to be able to put on this video in the background and sort of, be able to paint yourself and do your own creative practice and just relax. Even if you have it on while you're tidying or something. I just sort of want to show you a few of the art techniques that I like to use, and also just sort of talk about creativity a little bit. Alright, so I'm going to set up my camera. Here's my little setup here. I love this little, I don't know, it's like a little creature that I've got. I can attach my phone to it. So, alright, so I have got my camera set up. And I have absolutely no plan for what I'm going to paint, but that sort of makes it a little bit more exciting. And I actually think that it's really wonderful being able to come to painting with absolutely no plan, because it sort of allows us to take away a little bit of the ideas of perfectionism that we often come to art with. And in my honest opinion, I think perfectionism is probably the biggest enemy of the artist, at least that I can think of right now. I'm sure there's some other big ones, but perfectionism is definitely a massive enemy of the artist. And I think the reason for that is that it sort of gives us this fear of the blank page, and we think that we're not going to be good enough. We've sort of got that critical voice in our head telling us that we're not artists and that we can't do this. And coming to art instead with an attitude of just playfulness, I find really helpful for creating the best art. So sort of, I love paradoxes, and paradoxically, I think not trying in art or not trying to sort of do anything perfect can sort of help you come up with the best results. It's sort of nice as well just painting while I'm talking, because it means I'm not thinking about what I'm painting, and it's sort of my hand's just doing its own thing, and I'm not almost not in control of it, and I quite like that. But yeah, so today I'm definitely coming to art with the attitude of just playing. And it's really appropriate as well because today is a Monday for me, and it's the day that I celebrate a Sabbath, which is basically just a day of rest, where I spend time, just being playful, resting, and it's also part of my spiritual practice, so I spend time with God as well. But yeah, it's just a beautiful rhythm to have in life, as a day of rest, and sort of takes away the, need in our capitalist world to always be producing, always making things. And so potentially I shouldn't be making a video right now, but it felt like a really fun, playful thing to do, and I'm already enjoying it a lot. So yeah. So I'm just going to talk you through the technique I'm using at the moment, which I guess sort of happened accidentally. But I'm using a technique in watercolors at the moment called bleeding. And I've just so what bleeding is where you put down some wet paint, and then before it dries, you put some paint over the top. And you've got to make sure that paint has enough pigment in it, so you've got to sort of really dig into your palette. And yeah, when sort of you put wet paint on top of wet paint, it will sort of start to spread, like you can see happening here. I think it's a really beautiful effect. I love it. I think I'm going to put some yellow in the middle as well. My yellow has become rather not yellow. So let's see if I can make it a bit more yellow. There we go. So I guess another thing that's important to note with watercolor is when you're painting, and at some points we definitely do want things to bleed together because it creates this beautiful gradient effect. But if I want to create a layer outside of this, I actually want to keep this crisp line that I've got here. So it's really important to know in watercolor when we want to do this wet on wet technique and when we don't. So I'm actually going to entirely wait for that layer to dry before I do anything next to it. And I'm just going to sort of create another layer outside here. I might even sort of draw in the shape that I'd like for that layer to be, some sort of maybe petal shapes. Sort of imagining this is going to have some sort of flowery effect. Beautiful. Almost everything I ever paint ends up being a flower or a tree, but I am okay with that. And I hope you can also hear all the pretty sounds of birds in my background. And also cars going past, but let's focus more on the birds because it's one of the beautiful things about the place I live is there's lots of beautiful bird song around. I've just decided I want this to sort of... I've just been painting coral this morning. I haven't finished this painting yet, but you can see this painting that I've been doing. I kind of want to incorporate some elements of that in. But part of the issue is I now need to work very quickly to keep everything wet, because if we don't keep everything wet in a watercolor painting, things are going to stop drying and then we're going to get lines where we don't want them. So we sort of need to go back over everything so we don't end up with lines like the one we'll get here if we don't go back over everything. Alright, I need to work out now what color I want to combine with this red. And I guess one of the principles that I use whenever I do a watercolor painting is I'll never just use a single colour by itself. So I'll never, at the moment, you can see I've just got this plain red and it hasn't been mixed with any other colours. You'll see by the end of this there will be at least one more colour, if not many more, combined in with this red. Because that's the beauty of watercolour, we can sort of have this magical effect of all the different colours combined together. So here you can see this line has dried a bit, which is not ideal because it means that here we've got these little lines where we don't want them. But that's alright, we can just keep going over the top of it and it won't be too noticeable. So yeah, at the moment just trying to keep everything as wet as possible. Yeah, I absolutely love coming to watercolours in this totally playful way. As I said before, I had no idea how this was going to turn out at the beginning. Just making it up as I go. And doing exercises like that is really great for just unlocking that creativity and sort of lack of perfectionism, because we naturally do have that more analytical brain that wants to say, you know, this is what we're going to do and it's going to look perfect and it's going to look exactly like this. But being able to sort of switch that off for a moment and just be happy to play and not be perfect, so important to an art practice. So it's actually really good to intentionally do activities that switch off that analytical brain. So one of the things that I like to do is maybe paint or draw with your hand left-handed. There's also a concept called a blind contour, which I really love, and it's really fun to do it of someone's face because it always turns out looking quite Picasso-like. Maybe I'll give you an example at the end of the blind contour, but basically what you do is you don't look at your paper as you're drawing, and you know, of course it's going to look silly if you don't look at your paper, so there's no fear of, you know, there shouldn't be any fear of perfectionism, because we all are going to acknowledge that what we're going to paint or draw is just going to look totally silly, and that's okay. And yeah, then we draw someone's face, or we draw something that we can see, and it turns out, well, and also we have to make sure that we don't lift our pen off the paper the whole time that we're doing it as well, so that adds an extra level of challenge. But it's good because it means that we're not too worried about being perfect. And yeah, I did an activity with a friend yesterday, and it was actually her idea, not mine. But we both set a 1.5 minute timer, and we just painted some abstract shapes, and then at 1.5 minutes we'd sort of pass our piece of paper on to each other, and then we would continue each other's work, and we kept swapping a few times until we ended up with some pretty cool work. I might actually just go get it and show it to you. I'll be back in a moment. So here is the artwork that I started. I might just move my phone so you can get a better view. So I just started with this shape here, and then yeah, I think it looks pretty cool. It sort of looks like there's like a bit of maybe a tree thing happening here, and then a moon here, and then maybe some garden or flowers around here. I love the balance of it, sort of the gold here and the gold here. And I like this one even more. So it sort of started off with a bit of a embryo-like shape, and then, yeah, just some flowers grew out of that, and some, we've got some beautiful bleeding happening around here where the paint just, you just do a little dot of paint and it just spreads beautifully. Yeah, so I'm pretty happy with the colours in that one and how that one turned out as well, and just, yeah, it really helps us to be creative. And I just put a piece of paper on my wet paint there. It's not focusing on, but anyway. Alright, let's keep painting. I think it would be impossible for me to do an artwork without including some sort of leaves. It's sort of the common denominator between flowers and trees, isn't it? Leaves. I think I'm just gonna, from this middle part here, bring out some leaves. And as you can see, I accidentally touched this little bit here, so that green's going to start spreading. But that's all right. There's no mistakes. There's no perfectionism. We're just having some fun playing here. So I've been talking a lot about sort of art techniques and how to overcome perfectionism in art, but my other great love in life is creative writing, and I think it's such an important principle in creative writing as well, to sort of get rid of that perfectionism, and I think we can apply some of these concepts to creative writing. I'm in my other life also a high school English tutor, and I'm always trying to help my students to understand how to write creatively, and the best advice I can give them is just to stream of consciousness write, which is this idea of just writing down every single thought that comes to their head, no matter how silly it is. And inevitably what that's going to end up looking like is just writing sentences like, I don't know what to write, I can't think of anything, this is stupid, I hate writing. But we allow ourselves to write those things because that sort of allows us to come over the fear of the blank page. And once we've overcome that fear, that's when the gems can emerge. And I guess we do our, we can get rid of all of that in the editing process, that's fine. But in our initial, helping us be creative, it's important to not worry too much about, writing the perfect thing and letting, our ideas of what good writing is get in the way, because otherwise we're just never going to write anything down ever. So if you love creative writing or you have a creative practice, I just want to encourage you to try and do it imperfectly, because otherwise you probably aren't going to do it at all. And then, we can do most of the work in editing. I think that's a bit easier with creative writing because you can just sort of edit over the top. With art, you can't just, edit what you've painted. Once the lines are there, they're there. But I think I really like to use this process sort of to help me come up with my concepts for my art. And then I might sort of go and, do something a bit more serious that I'm spending more time on afterwards. You can probably hear the freight train in the background as I live right next to a train station. And as you can see with the leaves here, as I said before, I never just use one colour. I've already mixed in 2 colours of green plus yellow. And I'll just talk a little bit about colour theory for a second. If we ever want to make a colour darker with watercolour, probably what you'd think you do is add in black, but I never add in black to my watercolour paintings. Instead, I add in the complementary colour. So the complementary colour of green is red, so I'm just adding some little specks of red to the middle, and that's just going to give the effect of the middle of these colours being darker. So when we add 2 complementary colours together, they create black. But the reason we use complementary colours instead of black is it sort of just makes the painting a bit more vibrant and expressive, and you know, black just kind of dulls everything and makes it boring. So I've just added red there, and I'm about to add green, and hopefully when I mix these together they will make something resembling black. Add a bit more green in there. There you go. So hopefully you can see that's a fairly blackish, greyish colour that we've got there. Now I've just been talking about the idea of complementary colours, and there's probably a few people listening who are wondering what on earth a complementary colour is. So I might just show you how it works. I'll show you the different complementary colours on a sheet of paper. Actually, before I do that, I need to... So a part of the thing with watercolour is there's parts where you can't really pause what you're painting because you need things to stay wet so that you can blend things together like you want to. So when I'm in the middle of doing a watercolour painting and someone comes up to me and asks for something, I'm always like, you might need to wait a few minutes for me to finish this section while everything's still wet. Alright, these little leaves up here, it's not focusing very well. Can I make that focus? There we go. It already dried, so my red bits didn't blend in as well as I'd like, so that's why it's important to keep things wet, which I didn't do very well. But let me explain now the idea of complementary colours. So, complementary colours are basically opposite colours to each other on the colour wheel. So I'm just going to paint up a little colour wheel for you. So on one side of the colour wheel we have red. And then on the opposite side to that we have green. So red and green are complementary colours. Then we also have a yellow over here on the colour wheel. And then opposite yellow on the colour wheel, we have the complementary to yellow, which is blue. And the other main complementary colours that we have are orange, which is going to go with more of like a aqua kind of colour. Just going to mix a bit of green and blue together to create that colour. And then finally we have purple, and I don't have purple, so I'm also going to need to mix that. And the way that we mix purple is going to be with these two colours here. So I'm going to mix together the blue and the red, and that's going to make purple. And the opposite to purple is also sort of yellow, sort of green. So I think I did make a mistake before. Yellow and purple are actually the complementary colours, not blue and yellow. So yellow and purple are complementary, red and green are complementary, and orange and blue are complementary to each other. So whoops, I wasn't using a reference for that. But that's the fun of me just recording on a whim and making this up as I go along, is there's going to be some mistakes. And that is the theme for today, that, you know, sometimes we make mistakes and mistakes are okay. So I'm going to bring that into my video, and I'm not going to edit this out, even though I accidentally did that a bit wrong. But just so you do know, the correct complementary colours are purple and yellow, red and green, and blue and orange. And if you mix any of those colours together, they will make black. Alright, let's bring back my little artwork. And keep adding on some leaves. Hello, little fly. Also got some tea that I made myself. Which I added oat milk to, which is very nice. And it's a chai tea, but I always find tea bag chai teas are way too weak, so I added in my own cinnamon and cloves. It still could be stronger though. If anyone has any good recommendations for some better chai inside tea bags, let me know, because to be honest, I can't really be bothered to go to the effort to make loose leaf tea a lot of the time. I do try and compost my tea bags though. So I'm just going to add little bits of yellow and red into these leaves to make them a bit more fun and exciting, because I never just let a colour be a colour by itself. In watercolour painting, it always needs to be combined with other colours. I think one of the great things about watercolour painting is it does sort of the way that it all sort of blends and bleeds and there's all these happy mistakes in it, is it really does lend itself to being the sort of art that I can do a lot more freely and not worry so much about it being perfect. And it's definitely the sort of art that I use when I sort of want to do a bit of art therapy or something, because it allows me to feel much freer, as opposed to things like pencil drawing, which need to be a little bit more precise. See how, I don't know if you can see, but each of these little dots I'm making is just spreading across the whole leaf, and it's so satisfying and fun, and I love watercolour painting. Yesterday, I spent the morning out shopping, which, as we all know, shopping can be very tiring. And I got home and I was just in one of those moods where I just wanted to lie down and do nothing, and I had to do the washing, which was very annoying because I really didn't want to. I just had absolutely no energy. It was a Sunday afternoon. I don't know if you guys relate to that feeling on a Sunday afternoon where it's just so much effort to do anything, and you just want to lie down, but at the same time you're like, well, I want to, I don't want to lie down and have a nap and waste my day off on a Sunday. I want to sort of do something that is going to be a bit more energizing and give me energy. So it was so difficult to do, but I got up the strength to get out my watercolor paints and do some painting, and wow, I felt so much better afterwards. I'll show you what I painted. I don't love it, but I painted this little, I started that while I was out at a cafe, and then I sort of put the background in. It's a bit wishy-washy for my taste, but it's alright, it gave me energy. And then I also started my coral painting that I already showed you, which I still haven't finished. Alright, I am loving this painting so much. I can imagine putting it on a wall and looking very cute. Alright, I'm feeling like we need some more depth in this pink area. It's a bit too, I don't know, the pinks and the yellows feeling a bit too happy for me. I want to add a bit of blue melancholy in here, so I'm just going to add in some little dots. And these ones here, it's like still a little bit wet, so they're starting to spread, which I am liking the effect of. But yeah, that's another great thing about watercolor, is once it's dried you can put extra layers on and put little details in it. I love detail in art. It's like, yeah, dots. I love dots. Dots are great. Let me know if you love dots too. Maybe it's just me. Alright, so I just added some dots, and I'm like, well, now we need dots on all these outer bits of it as well, because there's dots on the inner bits, and I don't know, to create some balance, I feel like we need dots on all these little tendrils coming out. And so I'm asking myself, where am I going to put these dots? Often I'll sort of choose a source of light, and then my dots will go on sort of the darker side as sort of a bit of shading, but I haven't really done that with this inner area. So what I'm going to imagine is all the light is coming from the outside of this artwork, and it's sort of darker in the middle. So that means any part of these tendrils which is facing inwards towards the middle, I'm going to put dots on. And any part that is facing outwards, like here, I'm going to not put dots on, except I accidentally just painted a bit there while I was showing you. So since this is my first ever paint with me, I don't know what I'm doing, and that's alright, but I'd love you to share with me in however you access this video, whether it's in the comments or you saw it on Instagram. You can just message me and let me know what you'd like to see, what sort of things you'd like to chat about as I'm painting. My interests lie in stories and literature and philosophy and all those sorts of things. So let me know if there's anything, that you'd like to talk about as we paint together, because I would find that a lot of fun. And let me know if you have any questions that I can answer in the next one of these videos that I make. And I don't know what it says about me, but I have very much enjoyed just sitting here talking out loud to myself. But hopefully to real people who are watching this video as well, so let me know what you think of it. Speaking of my love of stories, I might share with you what I've been reading recently. So I've been reading A Tale of Two Cities by Charles Dickens, and I have just finished the first book of it, the first sort of section of it, and I'm very ambivalent. I'm not sure what I think of it, because it's probably one of the most difficult books I've ever read in my whole life, and I think it really requires a whole lot of cultural knowledge of the time. But there's sentences which I will read 6 or 7 times and I will still have no idea what they're talking about. So let me know if you've read it, A Tale of Two Cities, and your thoughts on it as well. But it was this sort of, it was a tricky one. The reason that I liked it was there was almost something enjoyable about these like big philosophical almost statements that didn't make any sense, but they were, they were sort of quite indulgent, I think, and there was something quite nice to read about them, and these quite sort of in-depth descriptions of things, as Charles Dickens is notorious for. Using lots of words to describe things. The myth is that he got paid by word. I'm not sure if that's actually true. I doubt it. But I think the descriptions are really beautiful, and it was also really nice when suddenly things did make sense after, reading an entire chapter where it didn't make sense. And using plot summaries was definitely necessary, so thank you, SparkNotes. I'm not sponsored by SparkNotes. But yeah, so I think one of the comments my friend made about the book is that when you started reading it, the first couple of chapters, it's almost like they're in a dream. One of the first chapters is sort of on this really cold, dark, horrible carriage ride, and then the next chapter after that is this character sort of somewhere between like waking and sleeping, and it's so hard to follow what's going on. But then slowly a plot eventually emerges, and sort of this idea of really slowly waking up from a dream, and that process was quite lovely. And then you get to the second book, and suddenly spoilers alert, I guess, but 5 years have passed, and there are new characters that are introduced, and we have a new different perspective, and so I'm wondering if I'm going to be able to get through that and keep reading. I'll let you know how I go, or if I don't let you know how I go, you can assume that I probably stopped reading. But yeah. So my review of A Tale of Two Cities is that I like the descriptions. They were fun to read and kind of lovely and indulgent, and just sitting on a train and reading about, completely different worlds is, and sort of the archaic old way of writing I found quite lovely, but at the same time, it was just a very confusing book. So yes, I would love to know what you have been reading recently. I've also been thinking a lot about T.S. Eliot's poetry recently, so if you haven't read that, I highly recommend. He's one of my favourite poets. He writes modernist poetry that sort of deals with the hopelessness, but also hope of modern society, and how sort of depraved life seems, and how, I guess the struggles with meaning, and it's sort of, his writing I find quite grungy and sort of shows those ideas of like urban decay. But also his writing, it's the sort of writing that it doesn't necessarily make sense. Like there's not exact meaning to it. But what I really love in reading his poetry is I think every person who reads it is sort of able to make their own meaning from it. And I'm sure what I get out of T.S. Eliot is completely different to what you'll get out of T.S. Eliot. So personally for me, I actually find his poetry quite hopeful, and I know that's different to how many other people see it, who consider it quite hopeless. And he does have this transition where he converts to Christianity, and suddenly his poetry does become more hopeful. But even from the beginning, I think there's these sort of undercurrents of hope in what he's writing that I love. But they're terribly depressing poems, and that's sort of right down my alley. So I do recommend some T.S. Eliot. I am reading his poetry at the moment because I'm writing a booklet about him for work. Alright, I am super happy with how this painting has turned out. There you go. I hope you can see it well there. And I also promised you earlier on that I would show you how to do a blind contour. I cannot believe I've been recording for 45 minutes. It doesn't seem that long. Alright, so you need a face to copy, and I do not have a mirror. Let me try and find a book. I'll be back. Right, here's the newest Womankind magazine, which is a magazine I love that sort of combines philosophy and psychology and history and literature and art all together from sort of a female perspective. So I'm just gonna, I highly recommend the magazine, but I'm just gonna grab a pencil and I'm gonna copy what I can see there. So just so you know, I'm not looking at my page, and I'm also not taking my pencil off the paper. I might just hold the magazine up so that I can't see. Okay, now I cannot see the page at all. The magazine is blocking it. Alright, here we go. And the point of this is to turn out super silly, so the sillier the better. And it just opens us up for creativity. Alright. Here are the eyebrows. I have to make it into a monobrow because I can't pick up my pencil. Some eyelashes on the eye. And the eyeball. Down the nose. Nostril. Nostril. Eyelashes, eyeball, and now let's do a lip. Alright, now there's a whole bunch of butterflies at the top that I need to draw as well, because she has butterflies instead of hair. Oh, okay. I've left the page. Alright, I think we're done. Alright. That didn't turn out as bad as it might have. There's definitely something there resembling a face. I'll let you see all the butterflies at the top as well. But yeah, as I said, like, it always turns out looking a bit Picasso-esque and a little bit silly and ridiculous, and yeah, it just takes away that need we have for perfectionism in drawing, and takes away that fear of the blank page as well that terrifies so many of us. So that's all the art that I'm going to do with you this morning, but yeah, I hope you had a wonderful time of just some peaceful relaxation and hearing my random rambling thoughts about my life. I basically just explained whatever my internal monologue was saying whenever it was saying something that was shareable. And yeah, I hope that this time has rejuvenated you and energized you and given you the energy and the creativity to go on with your life in joy. And yeah, I really do believe in the power of creativity and the power of rest and making time for playful creativity, instead of always, just being very serious about our creative practice. So, yeah, it was great spending time with you. Please, if you do watch this, interact so that I know that you have watched it, so I don't feel like I'm just speaking into the void. Although perhaps speaking into the void isn't too bad after all. Alright, farewell.